So, welcome to another episode of So What's Your Story? Today's guest is Kevin O'Neill, the founder of Breatheolution. Kevin and I first met not so long ago, actually, I don't think, Kevin. And I was on Formby Beach. It was freezing cold, and Kevin was going to teach me some breathing techniques to enable me to go into the sea and not necessarily feel so much cold. I'm probably not under egging this, but Kevin is known as the UK version of Wim Hof. He's the sort of the Iceman, but there's a lot more about Kevin. So, Kevin, welcome to So What's Your Story? Um, just a little bit of background, and I hope I've got this right. So you're a Buteyko, is that pronounced correctly?
Yeah, a lot of people are getting it right. Buteyko.
Okay.
Sounds a bit like potato. But yeah,
Yeah.
Buteyko is right. Yeah.
Breathing instructor, a cold
Sure.
water therapist, and through that, Kevin really specialises in supporting many areas, including mental health, anxiety, stress, PTSD, trauma, menopause, the nervous system, recovery, asthma. Kevin has actually currently helped in his career since he established the business in 2020, over 1,300 students, quite unbelievably and sort of quite frankly changed their lives. So welcome, Kevin. Welcome to So What's Your Story? I hope I did you justice on the introduction.
Oh man, yeah,
And,
absolutely.
so Kevin, tell us, what is your story? How did this all start? How did it all come about? Where are you today? And what are the benefits of breathology?
Okay. Well, thanks for having me. First of all,
You're
Ian. Thanks for
welcome.
welcoming me onto this. I'm honoured to be here. It's an amazing place. And my story, everybody asks me that, and my story sort of starts without going too far back.
Yeah, sure.
I was an alcoholic,
Wow.
and as I mentioned to you not long, a few minutes ago, I struggled with asthma all my life.
Okay.
I think thrown in the mix there, I had ADHD.
Okay.
Certainly at school, I was disruptive and stuff, and
Mhm.
and although we didn't really know what ADHD was then, as we do now, I had certain problems connected to that as well. Like I had an addictive personality, still do to a degree,
Mhm.
and that flagged up all sorts of issues in my life. I wasn't always the greatest dad. I've got 3 children, one on the way.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we've got a 20-week scan on Friday. So
Okay.
I've got 3 boys, a beautiful wife, my wife Sarah, who's literally just been an absolute rock through the 28 years that we've been together. And she noticed a lot of the issues that I had. Although she loved me, she noticed a lot of the problems that I had, and a lot of that was down to over breathing, autonomic, I beg your pardon, dysfunction of my own.
Mhm.
And then obviously once I got older, it became addiction,
Mhm.
and I was struggling with alcohol for over 15 years.
Okay.
And I was like a functioning alcoholic, and then sometimes not functioning
Okay.
alcoholic, which led on to other stuff, cocaine and various other substance abuse.
Mhm.
And I struggled with it for so long that I was starting to realise anyway, once I got to just over 40,
Mhm.
that it was kind of running out, the appeal of it, and I was struggling to recover as quick
Sure.
from going on these benders and these weekends. I'd just disappear.
Yeah.
And it was catching up with me.
And was that putting pressure on your relationships as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely it was.
Yeah.
I had narcissistic tendencies,
Okay.
and paranoia, all the things that comes with alcohol.
With
It's
all of that, yeah.
poison,
Yeah.
and we met in a situation on Formby Beach
We did indeed.
in a non-alcoholic
We did indeed.
group.
And just for our listeners' benefit, there's a group that is called Social Butterflies, and that's for people who have decided in their lives to take alcohol out of it. And just to make our listeners aware, I too was challenged by possibly drinking too much and not taking care of myself, and I made that decision 4.5 years ago to take alcohol out of my life. Thank you, Kevin. Kevin's just touching his heart. So, got a lot in common with you and can resonate and empathise with all that you're saying, Kevin. Sorry I disturbed your talk track.
No, it's important, and well done. 4 years, long time. I'll be 2 years sober in July, and
Congratulations to you as well.
Thank you. And it changed my life, stopping drinking. And what led up to that really was I lost my sister in 2019.
I'm sorry to hear that.
That's okay. She was only 49. She was only young. She died of sepsis, but there was a little bit of alcohol connected to that as well. She was using it for pain relief. And after she died, I sort of hit the drink quite hard, but I knew that I had to stop. I knew that I had to call it a day, and I did. And I know obviously this isn't about alcohol, this podcast, but I stopped drinking, and I was going to stop for 6 months. And somebody said, "Look, give yourself a year."
Yeah.
I was already lining up my Christmas drinks. I thought I'll get a bottle of this, and I was already doing it, and so I thought, right, I'll go for the year, and man, it just changed my life forever.
Amazing.
And it allowed me to sort of pick this up, which I picked this up. I was into Wim Hof, and I was reading Wim Hof's book way before that I got involved with cold water. I knew the benefits of it, but obviously never really sort of put my own body to the test until I got into the water with a friend of mine, and it all sort of took off from there. Because the first time I got in, I did all the characteristics, all the sort of characteristic things of getting into cold water, heavy breathing, hands up, shoulders, head sunk into the shoulders, and going into sort of sympathetic drive, really, of a bit of panic, and didn't stay in there too long, and came out and felt a bit nervous.
And that's very much a natural reaction, isn't it? That's our body saying, "Oh, what's happening here? Going into shock. I need to sort of protect myself." That expression you just did there, Kevin, where you wrapped your arms around yourself. That shivering and everything else.
Sure.
And I remember using your techniques. It was very, very different. I was entering into ice cold water, and I'm not saying it wasn't cold, listeners. Let me tell you, it was. But there wasn't this shock reaction, and we're going to talk more about that as we go through this conversation. But carry on. It's amazing that.
I started to get into the water every day, but then obviously I started to do some originally at the beginning some Wim Hof breathing, which is sort of a cross between sort of Kriya and Tumo breath, hyperventilation techniques, stressor exercises on the body, which I found overwhelming. The first time I did it, I sort of cried like a baby, and it really sort of unlocked something in me about respiratory health and about the lungs. And I started to sort of investigate why people experience shock in the cold. I started to look into what the lungs did. In fact, I was reading through books and listening to podcasts all day, every day.
Amazing.
And I just absolutely flooded myself with information. In fact, sometimes I was reading passages in books about how the human body works, and it was bringing me to tears.
Wow.
After years of annihilating mine. And I realised just how beautiful and perfect the body is, how it works, and it was making me emotional reading. I had to stop reading a lot of the times. And
that's incredible. Just for the listeners there, I've just had a rush of, like, my hair. When people say the hairs pick up on your back of your neck, the way you've just beautifully described that is just so powerful, because you were immersing yourself into a new knowledge set, and then reflecting on how you'd abused your own body and how cruel that was to yourself, maybe.
Absolutely, and it was eye opening, really. And for years I'd smoked and smoked all sorts of stuff as well.
So you'd really had a good go at yourself, Kevin.
Oh, I did. Yeah, I don't know how I'm here, to be honest. I don't know how I'm alive.
And you do look amazing today.
No, man, thank you so much. Thank you so much. But you mentioned then the nerves and the hairs on the back of your neck standing on end. That's your vagus nerve.
Right.
That's the biggest neural pathway. This is what everybody talks about at the moment.
Okay.
That sense that's connected to emotion, that same tingling you get up your back when you're sat on the beach and you're relaxed, you've got all your luggage out in your bedroom, and you eventually in your hotel, and you eventually sit there and you do a big deep breath.
Oh no, brother.
And then you get that tingle.
I can feel the sunshine already.
Absolutely. And that's when you get this tingling over your back and up your neck.
You're right.
And that's the vagus, the vagus nerve again.
That's the vagus nerve.
Sure. You're the biggest neural pathway in the body that connects to every visceral organ in your body. Every part of the body runs all over, from the stem of your brain here, your 10th cranial nerve runs all over your body to your colon, connected to every visceral organ, and to your bowel, to your stomach, everything.
Incredible.
So important. We might get into that. So I started to learn about the breath, and and about pranayama, about spirituality. I'd sort of ventured a little bit into spirituality before that, Catholic background, looked into Islam a lot.
Right.
You know, I prayed in mosques, and you know, I did all sorts of stuff, and
Wow.
trying to find where I was
Yeah.
as a human being.
Yeah.
And I investigated a lot into that. And although I'm not overly spiritual now as a human being,
Yes.
I'm more science based.
Uh-huh.
So this is why I chose Buteyko, because it focused on biomechanics, biochemistry, and flow, cadence, the amount of air that we need to be to reach homeostasis as humans. So in terms of our metabolism, how much oxygen do we need? So that's why I started to investigate the science of it. And I trained with a chap called Patrick McKeown in Ireland. And Patrick McKeown is one of the world leading experts on respiratory health. And he's friends with the likes of James Nestor, who a lot of people are talking about at the moment with his book Breath.
I've read that book.
Yeah, sure. So you'll know, yeah. And James Nestor is just amazing. What he's done with that book is he's brought something incredible to the forefront of just how important breathing is. You know, it's life force to the body.
And just as a segue here, if you don't mind, Kevin, we were talking about breathing before we came into the studio, and you noticed that I used an inhaler. Yeah.
Sure.
And then you said to me that you'd previously been asthmatic, and you spoke about breathing, and through the techniques that you use, you could actually either reduce somebody's usage of an inhaler or actually stop them using it completely.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. And I always thought this was not really possible. And, you know, first looking into Buteyko and the oxygen advantage, which is also Patrick McKeown, based on the work of Konstantin Buteyko, who's a Russian scientist. And he was doing work, you know, in the early 50s. But using these techniques of breath holding and improving the body's chemoreceptor sensitivity to carbon dioxide, that you can actually reverse asthma, and you can even reverse in some cases, or at least allow people with conditions like COPD and emphysema to breathe a little bit easier.
Wow.
All you have to do is read up on some of the work by a doctor called he said he wasn't really a doctor. He worked in the music industry. He was he worked with choirs, and he was
right.
Yeah, so he was like
where your breathing is essential to be able to vocalize those chords and things.
Sure.
So just so I'm clear in my mind, obviously I introduced you at the head of this session as the UK version of the Iceman, Wim Hof, which we had a little chuckle about, but it's true. Some of these techniques which and this study that you've taken yourself through, you don't have to go and jump in ice cold water to get there, do you? You can. That's part of it. You can use these breathing techniques to improve areas of your well-being, your mental health, your anxiety levels.
Sure.
We've not even spoke about anxiety yet, but
No.
I know you mentioned again outside the studio that anxiety is really stems from. Well, let me ask you, Kevin, where does anxiety really come from?
Sure. The origins of anxiety are, the thing is, every human being has anxiety. I have it.
Right.
You have it.
Yeah.
We all have it. And if we didn't have it, the likelihood is that we probably wouldn't have survived this long.
Okay.
Because we just keep putting our hand in the fire. We just keep jumping off mountains, crashing cars. We wouldn't be here.
Right.
We need anxiety. The brain and the autonomic nervous system needs anxiety to predict the future and to go over the past continuously in the mind to find us safety in the presence.
Interesting.
Yeah. And the origins of anxiety are based on the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system. Okay. So for those listeners that don't know the difference between the two, the sympathetic nervous system is fight, flight, or freeze.
Okay.
And then you have the parasympathetic nervous system, which is connected to everything that's rest and digest and being relaxed.
Okay.
Ventral vagal, as they refer to it in polyvagal theory, where you're at your most safest, happiest, and most relaxed. And the reason for that, well, I think the reason for that is that when you're conceived and you're in the womb, you're in the most parasympathetic space that you will ever be in until you die, but in terms of your existence on Earth. And for 9 months, you're in a bubble of liquid and safety. It's the safest place you ever are with mum. The sound is muffled, you're in warm liquid, you're not breathing, but you're surviving and living and on the umbilical, through the umbilical cord and through your mother. Everything is catered for. You are the ultimate safety. And then after 9 months of being in that parasympathetic overload, you're forced through a narrow canal, and then you're thrust out into this space. And when that happens, and even if it's a cesarean, which happens a lot more these days, you still come out and experience 3 things altogether. As a baby, you come out and you're frightened, you're cold, and you take a breath through your mouth to empty your lungs.
Of course, yeah.
So the autonomic nervous system, it remembers this. The brain doesn't cognitively remember it, but your body does.
Wow.
There's a book called The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. He explains how the autonomic nervous system and human bodies remember everything as part of your past. It has to keep you safe in the present, to make sure that you don't keep doing these things again, and predicting the future again to try and find safety in the present. You eventually make your way out of mum. You're crying, you're cold, you're frightened, and eventually you make it back to parasympathetic after being in sympathetic drive for the first time as a human. You go back, you find warmth and the comfort of the warm skin of mum, and then you latch. This is what we do as humans, as mammals. We latch on, and then when you latch on, how are you breathing?
And just for the listeners' benefit there who can't see Kevin, he's closed his mouth and he's breathing through his nose, of course, just like a baby would when she's suckling on his or her mother's breast. They're not breathing through their mouth, right?
Through the nose. So anything that's connected with safety, with rest, security, warmth, non-vulnerable, is connected to nasal breathing. That's why when we take a breath through the nose and we breathe out slowly through the nose, in and out through the nose, the autonomic nervous system is far more relaxed. Okay. So that's why over breathing is so connected to anxiety, and breathing through the mouth is connected to anxiety, because the autonomic nervous system associates mouth breathing with fear. So any time that you've ever been frightened in your life, ever, you've always been breathing through your mouth. Yeah. Panic disorder, panic attacks, they're all associated with when you're crying, when you're upset, all through the mouth. Wow. You never cry through your nose. When you breathe through your nose, if you take a breath with me now, you breathe in for 4 seconds and breathe out for 6. You automatically feel relaxed.
You do. I'm ready for sleep.
Yeah, exactly. So breath is connected to everything. It remembers every time that you've been hurt, bullied, vulnerable, attacked, cried. Wow. It remembers everything. And it has to keep us safe in the presence. And this is why high 90% of people that I see with anxiety or panic disorder, claustrophobia, OCD, autonomic dysfunction, issues, that they're all breathing through their mouth. They're snoring at night, they're waking up in the morning with a dry mouth, they're hyperventilating, they're struggling to get to sleep. Breathing is life force to the body. It is the first thing you do when you come out of your mother, is you breathe and then you eat. If we focused on those 2 things alone and made them perfect as human beings, as perfect as we could be, we'd be a lot healthier.
Amazing. Kevin, that's incredible. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I think it's just so powerful what you've just said. And I was sort of envisaging sports people, actually. When you see sports people and they're in an environment where a boxer, now a boxer obviously wears a gum shield, so it's very difficult for him to breathe. But when they're in that stress part of the bout where they're getting beat, you tend to see them breathe heavily through the mouth.
Sure.
Don't you?
Absolutely, yeah. And the same with people in hospital. If you've ever lost a loved one, or you see people that are very poorly, how are they breathing? They're
Yeah,
through the mouth.
Through the mouth.
And a lot of people die, and they die. I know this is quite,
Yeah.
it's a bit of an awkward situation, awkward subject.
Yeah.
But when people pass away, people who work in hospitals and that, they say they struggle to close the mouth.
Wow.
Because they die.
Goodness me, with the mouth open.
Sure.
Wow, Kevin, that is incredible. Let's touch on to, if we may, cold water therapy.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, for sure,
Yeah,
absolutely, yeah.
So I'm just thinking about this, and when we were on Formby Beach, and it was great. It was an amazing experience. There was a group of us, but for you, how do you work in your day-to-day sessions with your students? Do we call them students? What do you call them?
I think now clients. I think they are.
Clients.
That's what they refer to.
Clients.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Some people are coming over for a giggle. Some people are coming over for a buzz.
Yeah.
Other people are coming over because they need it.
Yeah.
And some people, I've dealt with loads of people who've been suicidal.
Have you?
I've dealt with lots of people that are anxious, frightened, and that are in abusive relationships.
Wow.
And people with complex trauma and
Wow.
PTSD.
And how would that work then typically? Would they come to you individually? Would they come in a group session? Would you have specific sessions for specific areas that you're going to help them with? Or is there just a sort of how does it work, Kevin?
Yeah, so basically when I first started to do this, obviously it was classed in sort of in groups, really, groups of people.
Mm-hmm.
But I was soon realising that if you take groups of people in the water, you start to lose too many individuals to this sort of where they're panicking. Yeah. So you can't really get to them. And nobody has to breathe like that when they get in the cold. Nobody has to go into that fear. Mm-hmm. You're in control of your nervous system. You don't have to breathe that way. But you do need co-regulation sometimes. You need to be with others, or you need to look at others just to know that you're safe. And as human beings, we rely on co-regulation. It's the first thing we do when we come out. We co-regulate straight away, and all the way through life, we co-regulate with others. But mainly now I work with small groups. There are people that I've trained over the last 2 years who are doing this now. They're doing even at Picmere.
Yeah.
They do big groups on a Sunday.
They do.
And they're splashing out and they're doing all this thing. But there's a lot of people that get in those situations and they can't hack it. They step away. Yeah. And if they do that, they're not really building any resilience. They're not learning anything.
Correct.
So although the money would be nice, it doesn't really sit with me. That I'd rather work with small groups. Good. And this way they're getting knowledge. They're taking away tools that they can use so that they don't have to get into that sort of that panic response. They should be able to remain completely focused all the time.
Yeah. And I guess that's an interesting sort of lead into my next question, which is, so let's say, and I do swim in Picmere Lake, by the way.
Sure. Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's beautiful. Perhaps I shouldn't say that to all the listeners because it would just be packed on a Sunday then. But I go really early, so you'd have to get up early to catch ahead of me. So, let's say I'm curious about doing some breathing therapy or some cold water therapy, and do you have advice on what people should look for, what they should sort of try and avoid, or is that a hard question to answer, or are you comfortable sort of trying to answer that question in as much as what are the do's and don'ts? I guess I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, know your capabilities and know your own health is important. And not everybody knows their own health. The people think they're healthy, and of course, even if we think we're healthy. And we could even get a letter off a doctor to say that we're healthy, but that wouldn't mean to say that there isn't anything there that's underlying. If you've got high blood pressure or if you're pregnant, I wouldn't get into cold water. If you have any other sort of medical conditions that are associated to your heart rate or heart condition, it's a good idea not to, or at least seek advice from your doctor. Bearing in mind, I've taken people in with pacemakers.
Right.
I've taken people in with cancer, stents fitted, heart bypass operations.
Yeah.
I've given everybody an opportunity to get into the cold, but as long as you're not going into shock, that's the key. But the thing is that if you're breathing into, you can breathe into shock as well, in the nature of how frightened you feel, and you're causing restriction to blood vessels if you do that. So. Which is why I generally tend to tell people when they're getting into the cold to breathe in through their nose and out through the mouth. You have to mimic being back on the breast of your mother.
There you go.
You have to be parasympathetic.
There you go.
So it's a bit like when you get into a cold shower.
Yeah.
Your autonomic nervous system automatically does this.
Mm.
You know, and we spoke about this earlier. Your
Yeah.
hands close.
Yeah.
And your body comes up here to protect your organs.
Yeah.
And you start to, as soon as the water gets on your midriff, or
Yeah.
and then you're being pushed into sympathetic drive, then adrenaline release.
Yeah.
Get out, because it doesn't want you there.
Yeah, and just for the benefit of the listeners there, what Kevin was gesturing was he was pulling his hands across his chest in a folded crossover gesture, and sort of hugging himself and then breathing, as you could hear from him. You know, this almost panic mode of really wrapping yourself in self-protection. So thanks for sharing that, Kevin.
Sure.
You know, and I think it's interesting what you said, and you know, coming back to you, Kevin.
Sure.
You know, you've been through a journey, mate. You've been through a journey in your life, and you're still on that journey, right? Yeah. The journey of perhaps discovery. You know?
Sure.
But you're helping thousands of people.
Sure.
You're helping people with tremendously challenging conditions in their life. People that perhaps are desperate for help. People that thought that there's no other option for them, you know, and they're in a dark space, and then they find you, and their life changes. How does that feel to you?
Yeah, and people say this all the time. You know, I'm really privileged to be able to do this, and you know, I learn far more from you than you learn from me. You know, we spoke about asthma today, and you know, I learn from people all the time, and their habits and their past, their traumas. So it kind of helps me to be better at what I do. But I'm not really helping people. People are helping themselves, and that's the key.
But you are the facilitator.
I am the facilitator. I'm giving them information. I'm giving them knowledge, so that they can help themselves. But it takes effort, as you know, to get into the cold each day, and to monitor your breathing. It takes effort, and it takes stepping out of your comfort zone. We're all far too comfortable at the moment. Human beings have been very, very, very cold. From when humans first started to sort of evolve on the savannas of Africa, and you know, and to get to this place where we're now in the northern hemisphere, we've had to be freezing cold in the past, freezing cold, and you know, at the moment we're too warm. Central heating, heated seats, hot houses, you know, we're never cold. You know, what's this doing to human beings? It's causing problems. Nursing homes are ovens for old people, and they're used to the cold. We need to look more into it. It's important. The body doesn't want to be this, doesn't want to be level. It wants to be up and down. It wants variability.
Okay.
It wants to be hot, cold, acidic, alkaline. It wants to be up and down,
right,
so that it can adapt constantly. Otherwise it gets a bit dormant. Cells start to mutate. Things start to get lazy.
And is that where then the trouble starts, i.e. infections, illnesses?
Sure, high inflammation.
Okay.
You know, people, you know, the way that we breathe affects how much oxygen we retain in our body. Okay. Oxygen is critical for every cell of the body. If we are over breathing, if we're hyperventilating as human beings, and that hyperventilating, people think, well, I don't go around puffing and panting like a dog. It doesn't actually look like that. You know, it looks like this. So you're breathing like this.
And Kevin is now gesturing just a slow hand up and down slowly, and I guess that's the simulation of what your lungs are doing, maybe.
Sure, absolutely. Okay. So breathing in and out. I know that wasn't great for a podcast, that, but a human breath should be. That's
why I described it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you're so good at it. But yeah, that's about 5.5 seconds.
Okay.
Is what a human breath should be. Now that's this.
Right.
And down.
Longer.
You don't breathe like that.
I don't.
I don't breathe like that. I try to. Nobody does. But that is all over the world. All scientists have all come together. All respiratory health professionals have come together to say it should be 5.5 seconds.
Wow. So a breath in for 5.5 seconds.
And a breath out for 5.5 on average.
Wow. So anyway, listeners, as you're listening to that, let's pause for a second and let's time for 5.5 seconds in silence.
Sure.
And if you'd like to join me on this, I'm going to try and breathe in. Should we do it together, Kevin?
Sure.
We're going to try and breathe in for 5.5 seconds, and then we're going to try and breathe out for 5.5 seconds. So listeners, let's do this together. We're going to pause for a second, and then you'll hear us inhale through our nose. Kevin, is it?
Yeah, if you can, try and breathe in and out through the nose. If
Okay.
you can. If you can't breathe in and out through the nose, breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth.
All right, let's do it. In
Okay.
3, 2, 1. Now, I found that incredibly difficult.
Sure.
I really did.
And the reason why people find it difficult is because for years we've been over breathing. You know, I've been over breathing for 40 odd years of my life. I've had asthma for 40 years.
Yeah.
And I was always waking up with sore throats, always struggling with a blocked nose, always had hay fever. I don't have any of it anymore.
That's incredible.
I don't snore at night.
Wow.
I don't get up to go to the toilet in the middle of the night anymore. It all stopped.
Wow.
Because all I had to do was change the way that I breathe. It was life changing, you know. And you know, 2 years ago when I first started this, I tried to run, breathing through my nose, and I couldn't make 500 yards without breathing through my mouth. I felt as though I was suffocating.
Yeah.
It took me 6 months to run half a marathon with my mouth